The weight of the evidence Maya and I had unearthed from Ethan's digital Pandora's box was suffocating. For days, we sifted through it, cataloged it, and cross-referenced it. The financial crimes were undeniable, a complex web of embezzlement and fraudulent transfers. The family meeting I'd initially envisioned, a dramatic confrontation fueled by personal betrayal, now seemed inadequate, almost trivial in the face of such calculated criminality. Maya laid out the options with stark clarity. "We can use this in the divorce, certainly," she explained, her legal mind dissecting the implications. "It gives you immense leverage." Or, she paused, her gaze steady on mine. "We can fulfill a civic duty, Sarah. This isn't just about you anymore. He's stolen from his company, his partners, possibly even clients." The decision to report Ethan, my husband, the man whose life had been interwoven with mine for 5 years, to the federal authorities was not made lightly. It was a sleepless, gut-wrenching week of wrestling with my conscience. Was this justice, or was it vengeance amplified to a terrifying degree? Could I live with being the one to potentially send him to prison, regardless of his betrayals? I pictured his face, not the charming mask he wore for the world, but the cold, calculating glint I'd seen when he thought I wasn't looking, the casual cruelty in his dismissal of my pain. And then I pictured Olivia, her smug triumph at my birthday, her willingness to destroy my life for her own selfish gains, all bankrolled by Ethan's stolen wealth. The answer, when it finally came, was cold and hard, like a shard of ice in my heart. This was bigger than my personal pain. This was about accountability on a scale I hadn't initially fathomed. It was the only way to ensure true justice, not just for my shattered heart, but for the integrity he had so callously disregarded. The investigation, once Maya had discreetly presented an anonymized dossier of compelling evidence to the appropriate federal channels, moved with a momentum that was both terrifying and validating. Ethan's company, a prestigious Chicago architecture firm known for its gleaming skyscrapers and impeccable reputation, was forced to launch an immediate, intensive internal audit. The pristine facade of Ethan's professional life, so carefully constructed, began to show hairline cracks, then deep fissures, before shattering with spectacular velocity. Gossip, at first hushed whispers in boardrooms and exclusive city clubs, soon escalated into speculative articles in the city's business. Journals, high-level financial probe at Sterling Price Architects, senior partner under scrutiny. Though his name wasn't initially published, the thinly veiled descriptions of the rising star architect with a penchant for offshore dealings pointed unmistakably to Ethan. I watched from the detached safety of Maya's guest room, a silent observer, as the empire he built on a foundation of lies and stolen money began to audibly groan under its own corrupt weight. Ethan's arrest, when it finally came, wasn't the dramatic public spectacle one might imagine from a Hollywood movie. It happened with a quiet, almost anticlimactic efficiency as he was attempting to board a red-eye flight to a small Caribbean island known for its lax extradition treaties. Maya, through a well-placed legal contact, had received an urgent tip that Ethan, likely spooked by the tightening internal audit and the increasingly pointed questions from his board, was a significant flight risk. We'd relayed the information, along with his probable flight details, to the authorities just hours before his departure. The local evening news carried a brief, grainy clip. Ethan, looking disheveled and stunned, a far cry from his usual polished self, being escorted in, handcuffs by 2 stoic FBI agents through a quiet corridor of O'Hare International. There was no dramatic chase, no tearful pleas for the cameras, just the stark, ignominious reality of a white-collar criminal apprehended before he could escape the consequences of his actions. That, I realized with a chilling sense of finality, was a far more fitting and publicly damning end to his elaborate charade than any personal, tear-filled showdown I could have orchestrated. The silence of his downfall was, in its own way, far louder than any scream I could have uttered. Olivia's world, predictably, began to unravel in a different, more personal, yet equally public and humiliating way. With Ethan's considerable assets frozen pending the investigation, her lavish, Ethan-funded lifestyle evaporated overnight. The designer clothes that had once been her armor, the trendy downtown apartment that had been her stage, the endless stream of carefree brunches and shopping sprees all vanished like mist in the morning sun. Carol, our ever-reliable PI, reported that Olivia had been forced to move into a cramped, rundown studio apartment on the city's outskirts, her once vibrant social media presence dwindling from glossy, curated influencer posts to a rarely updated stream of vague, melancholic quotes and blurry selfies. The Project O Ethan had so generously funded, her baby, her ticket to a life of ease, was now her sole, terrifying, and unfunded responsibility. She tried calling me dozens of times, leaving rambling, tearful voicemails. I never listened. I just deleted them, one by one. Then came the inevitable confrontation with Liam Slater. Armed with the irrefutable paternity implications from the burner phone texts Maya had expertly recovered, and backed by Carol's photographic evidence of their clandestine affair, Liam, after an initial period of furious denial and attempts to paint Olivia as a fantasist when first contacted by his own legal counsel, a step Maya had anticipated and advised Liam's lawyer to take, had been cornered into demanding a DNA test for Olivia's baby immediately after its birth. The results were, of course, conclusive. Liam Slater, the good boy from a good family my mother had once approved of, was the father. The miracle baby, the cornerstone of Olivia and Ethan's web of deceit, now had an undisputed and, from all accounts, deeply resentful biological father, unwillingly ensnared in the toxic fallout of their lies. The intricate tapestry of karma, as Maya often dryly remarked, was being woven with meticulous, almost artistic precision, each thread pulling tighter, ensuring no one escaped their due. The whispers and salacious rumors that had ignited at my ill-fated birthday dinner now had concrete, verifiable facts to feast upon, and Olivia, who had once so desperately craved the spotlight, found herself mercilessly scorched by its unrelenting glare, her name a byword for scandal in the social circles she'd tried so hard to conquer. The wheels of justice, once set in motion, ground Ethan's world into dust with an impersonal, relentless efficiency. I didn't attend his sentencing hearing. Maya advised against it, saying my presence wasn't necessary and might only stir up more trauma. She went, of course, a silent sentinel particulars for my interests and relayed the outcome later that day. Ethan, stripped of his tailored suits and arrogant demeanor, had apparently wept openly when the judge handed down a sentence of 7 years in federal prison for embezzlement and fraud. 7 years. It felt like an eternity, yet somehow not. Nearly enough for the years of deceit, the shattered trust, the life he had systematically stolen from me. But as Maya recounted his broken sobs, his pleas for leniency citing his impeccable prior record, I felt surprisingly little. No vindictive triumph, no surge of joy, just a quiet, hollow emptiness where the anger used to burn so fiercely. His downfall was his own making, a direct consequence of the choices he had embraced. Olivia's ruin was a slower, more agonizing spectacle, played out not in a courtroom, but in the harsh theater of everyday life. Liam Slater, after the DNA confirmation, had reluctantly stepped up to his paternal responsibilities, but not without a bitter custody battle that painted Olivia in an even more unflattering light, manipulative, desperate, and utterly unprepared for motherhood. He won primary custody, leaving Olivia with visitation rights and a meager child support payment that barely covered the essentials for her new bleak reality. I heard through the grapevine, the same social circles that had once fated her, that she was struggling, working a series of dead-end retail jobs, her former sparkle extinguished, replaced by a haunted, resentful gaze. There was a part of me, a small, shriveled part I wasn't proud of, that felt a grim satisfaction. But a larger part, the part that was slowly healing, felt a profound, weary sadness for the waste of it all, for the bright potential she had, so carelessly thrown away in her pursuit of my life. One blustery autumn afternoon, months later, I saw her. I was sketching in Lincoln Park, a newfound ritual that brought me peace. Olivia was across the pond, pushing a stroller with a listless mechanical motion, her usually vibrant clothes replaced by a drab, oversized hoodie. She looked thin, tired, and utterly alone. Our eyes met Wahag accidentally across the water, for a fleeting second. There was no recognition in hers, or perhaps she chose not to acknowledge me. And in that moment, seeing her not as the triumphant tormentor, but as a diminished, struggling young woman, the last vestiges of my rage seemed to dissolve, not into forgiveness, but into a kind of detached pity. She was a ghost from a past life, a life I had decisively and necessarily exorcised. Maya often spoke of karma, that intricate cosmic ledger. I wasn't sure I believed in it in the traditional sense, but I couldn't deny the almost poetic justice in their unraveling. They had sought to build their happiness on the foundations of my pain, and in doing so, had engineered their own spectacular collapse. It was a harsh lesson, one written in the currency of ruined lives and broken dreams. But it was their lesson, to learn, not mine to continually relive or gloat over. My healing was a quiet, internal process, like tending a secret garden. I focused on my work, which flourished with a renewed passion. I reconnected with old friends whose company I genuinely enjoyed, friends who had known me before Ethan, before the charade. I started volunteering at a local women's shelter, listening to stories of resilience that put my own struggles into perspective. It was there, among women rebuilding their lives from far greater devastation, that I began to understand the true meaning of strength, not as the ability to inflict pain in return, but as the courage to heal, to grow, to choose light even after an eternity in darkness. The past, with its betrayals and heartaches, could not be erased, but its power to define my future was diminishing with each passing day, each conscious choice I made to embrace peace over bitterness. The inferno had raged, but from its embers, something new, something unexpectedly resilient was beginning to take root. The final courtroom gavel fell, not with a resounding crash that signified ultimate victory, but with a quiet thud that marked the end of a painful chapter. Ethan's appeals were exhausted, his fate sealed. Olivia, a shadow of her former self, was navigating the murky waters of co-parenting with a resentful Liam, her life a stark contrast to the one she had tried to steal. Their stories continued, but they were no longer intertwined with mine in any meaningful, agonizing way. The cords had been cut, not just legally, but emotionally, spiritually. My own story, however, was just beginning its most authentic chapter. The rage, the bitterness, the consuming need for retribution, they had served their purpose, fueling me through the darkest tunnels. But I realized that holding on to them indefinitely would only keep me tethered to the past, a prisoner of fate, my own making. True liberation, I discovered, wasn't just about seeing them fall. It was about my own ascent, unfettered and free. It reminded me of something I'd once read in a Buddhist teaching Maya had shared. Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. Letting go wasn't an act of forgiveness for them, not in the conventional sense. It was an act of profound self-love, a reclaiming of my own peace. The phoenix analogy, which once felt like a dramatic metaphor, now resonated with a quiet truth. I hadn't just risen from the ashes. I had been fundamentally reforged in that inferno. The old Sarah, the one who craved external validation, who defined her worth by her marriage or the prospect of motherhood, was gone. In her place was a woman who understood her own strength, her own resilience, A woman who found joy not in the grand, societal milestones, but in the quiet, steady rhythm of a life lived with intention and integrity. My design business thrived, becoming a canvas for my renewed spirit. I took on projects that challenged me, that allowed me to create spaces that nurture and inspire. I even designed a small, serene meditation garden for the women's shelter, where I volunteered, a place for quiet contemplation and healing. It was in giving back, in helping others find their footing after their own storms, that I found some of the deepest fulfillment. This, perhaps, was the future I was meant for, one not defined by a husband or a child, but by purpose and connection. I often talk about the nature of suffering and healing. The Christian tenet of forgiveness, once a concept I'd railed against, in my anger began to take on a new meaning. It wasn't about condoning their actions or absolving them of their responsibility. It was about releasing the poison of resentment from my own soul, allowing grace not for them, but for myself to enter. The past, with all its ugliness, was an immutable fact, a scar etched into my history. But scars, I learned, were not just reminders of pain. They were testaments to survival, to the body's and spirit's incredible capacity to mend. I could not change what happened, but I held the brush to paint my future, and I chose vibrant, hopeful colors. There are still days, of course, when a shadow of the past might fall, a fleeting memory, a pang of what might have been. But it no longer consumes me. It's merely a whisper, a reminder of how far I've come. I found solace in simple things: the warmth of the morning sun on my face, the laughter of friends like Maya who had stood by me, the quiet satisfaction of a day's work well done, the intricate beauty of that little bird I'd once drawn, the one rising from the flames. It now hangs framed in my studio, a constant reminder not of the fire, but of the flight. My life didn't magically become a fairy tale. There was no Prince Charming waiting in the wings, no instant erasure of the pain. But what I found was something far more valuable: an unshakable sense of self, a deep well of inner peace, and an unwavering belief in my own ability to forge a new dawn, to find my own light, no matter how profound the darkness had once been. And that, I realized, was the most profound victory of all. Thank you for walking with Sarah on this incredibly difficult, yet ultimately empowering journey. Her story is a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the power we all have to redefine our futures, no matter the betrayals of the past. What is one lesson you'll take away from Sarah's story that resonates with your own life? We'd be honored if you shared your thoughts in the comments below. Your reflections might just be the light someone else needs to see today. Thank you for walking with Sarah on this incredibly difficult yet ultimately empowering journey. Her story is a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the power we all have to redefine our futures, no matter the betrayals of the past. What is one lesson you'll take away from Sarah's story that resonates with your own life? We'd be truly honored if you shared your thoughts in the comments below. Your reflections might just be the light someone else needs to see today. If Sarah's journey to reclaim her life truly moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button. And to ensure you don't miss out on future powerful revenge stories, tales of overcoming family betrayal, and more true confession-style narratives that empower and inspire, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. We're building a community dedicated to these gripping stories, and we'd love for you to be a part of it. Until next time, may you find strength in your own journey and light in your own dawn.